I was thinking about something. This ain't a question, but I think it's worthwhile considering. Matthew chapter 7, Troy talks about the idea of judge not that you be not judged, knowing this, that you should receive the greater condemnation. Um, the hotel I'm staying at, I tend to stay in one brand of hotels because we get the points and it saves the school money in the long run. Normally, I get very good value. And the hotel I happen to be staying at, they haven't sponsored the program, so I'm not going to say their name, but it's very trendy. It's very trendy. It's what would you pro millennial hipster type, and it's a minimalist idea.
Minimalist.
Like, I
There
mean,
you go.
you walk in the room, there's no coffee pot in your room, there's not a microwave. And I know y'all think, oh, he's complaining. I'm not complaining, but they don't even have a closet. They put some hooks on the wall, and the whole concept is minimalist.
Like a poor bachelor
And
studio apartment.
maybe, I mean,
Yes.
it's nice, it's clean,
Yeah.
but I feel like I'm in a dorm room tonight.
Yeah.
And that's okay. That's okay. I believe me, it's clean, it's nice. I'm so thankful to have it. The bed is very comfortable. I'm not complaining, but it's different. It's not what
Mhm.
I'm used to. And you go in, and the lobby is set up because what they say is they don't want you in the room. They want you coming down and congregating and mingling and getting to know other people that are traveling. I wonder how much that really happens. And everything is very hipster. It's not what I'm used to, Troy. I mean, there's kind of an expectation I normally have
Sounds
that
to
I'm
me
looking for in a hotel.
kind of like a hostel. You know, we had those in South America and Latin America. I think there's hostels here in the United States as well, where you have, people who are hiking or traveling. It's usually younger people. They come through. They don't have all the expectations of the room or anything because they are going to go to the lobby and hang out and make friends and stuff like that. You know what this says? You know what you just said? All of that. You just said you're not very friendly is what you said.
No, I didn't mean that. I just, well, maybe so. I don't know. Not in the hotel setting. I want to go to my room. I want my comforts in my room. Everybody leave me alone. But I found myself being like, this is so silly. This is stupid. This doesn't make any sense. But then I got thinking, this brand of hotels, they are very successful. They know what they're doing. And what it is there is a large group of people out there that this speaks to, and that's why they're doing this. And so when I say that this is silly, this is, and I'm coming around to a
I was
spiritual
going to
reason on
say,
this,
I
guys.
see something coming here.
Mhm.
When I say that, what I'm doing is I am looking down upon that group of people just because it's not what I like. If this is what somebody likes, there's nothing wrong with this. It's not changing the fundamental part of I need a clean place to lay my head down. I need a place to be able to shower, to be able to get rested, get ready for the day tomorrow. You know, a lot of times, excuse me, I'm getting choked up here. A lot of times we've talked on this program about the generational differences, and we struggle getting the older group to reach down to the younger generations, and we say, well, the younger generations need to do more for the older group. Well, I just happened to find myself, and I was thinking, I'm being very judgmental of somebody, and if they like this, then this is a really nice thing for them. And perhaps I need to embrace it rather than looking at it as being something negative. And so earlier I was looking at it, I was like, you know what? Those closets that I was used to, this is actually kind of handy because I can see what my clothes are tomorrow. And I started looking at some of the positives to it. I was like, hey, this is kind of nice. They made a place under the bed for my shoes. They really thought some of this out. And so I started appreciating it rather than being judgmental towards it. We need to be careful of that in the church. There's things we can't change. Doctrine we cannot change. But we need to realize different generations think differently. And as long as they're not changing doctrine, appreciate their viewpoints and what they find interesting. You got anything to add to that?
Absolutely. Listen, that's a huge subject right there. The generational gaps that we have in our culture today. There's not really that big of a gap between, for example, me and you and our fathers and even our grandfathers. There's a lot of similarities in the culture between those generations. But these later generations, and I know a lot of people like to pick on the millennialists, but hey, it's true. They think differently. and the generations after them think differently, act different, and you see that in your own children. Um, so the point being is exactly what you said. The gospel doesn't change, the message doesn't change, the doctrine doesn't change, but how you say it or the way you deliver the message, would that be a better way of describing that? The way you deliver the doctrine, the message, that must change, sometimes with culture.
Oh, it does. I mean, it may be that we don't have I wonder sometimes when they switch from scrolls to the book form we have now, if people say, well, you know what, it's not as sacred as when you had a scroll and had to scroll through it. But,
I don't
well,
like
and
the
I
scroll.
make
I
that
don't like
point
these
because,
newfangled books. I want the scroll. Give me the scroll back. That's a good
yeah,
point.
but that's kind of what we've done at times with, I don't see how they do this stuff on the phones. They need to have a Bible in hand, and you know me, Troy. I want a book in my hand. What do I have right now? I got a book. I got the computer too, but I want my hard print Bible. But this younger generation coming up, they seem to be able to navigate through digital formats of stuff just fine.
Exactly.
And so,
And what a great point. Just that one thing right there. And you said this earlier, we need to be careful. Don't let that divide the church. We need to understand each other. So if a younger brother walks up to the pulpit and say he's got scripture reading that evening and he pulls out his phone and he reads it from his phone, some older people get upset with that. Well, there needs to be understanding on both sides. The younger generations need to understand where the older generation's coming from, and the older generation needs to learn and accept where the younger generation's coming from. There is a difference today, and it's hard, but it's the same process you went through in your hotel room. At first, it's strange. At first, you don't like it, but then when you sit back and you look at it and you go, you know what? That's not so bad after all. That actually works. That's not really for me, but I understand where they're coming from.
exactly. Becky puts on here, people don't like changes. And I think everybody's like that. I noticed what you said, Marilyn. I'm just getting old. You're right. You're right. I'm getting there. I'm not there yet, but I'm
That's what
getting
those
there.
gray hairs are in the beard there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But Becky goes on and puts, change is okay if it doesn't change the word. And that's
Amen.
right. Now,
Amen.
change is hard for anybody, but the older we
Yeah.
get, the harder it is.
That's
But
right.
if if we're gonna have to wield to somebody, let's take this older generation to younger generation. Who should we act? Because I've heard a lot of them be like, well, they just need to do what we want. They need to give us this. This is what we're used to. Who ought to be more mature to be willing to change?
You sound like a young whippersnapper.
Well, I don't mean it that
I'm
way.
messing with
I'm
I'm
just
messing
saying
with you, guy.
the reality is we've got to be mature enough to say, all right, this doesn't matter. I had an old elder tell me one time, he wasn't nearly as old as I thought he was, because he's still living today. And this was years ago when I was in high school. But he told me, he said, guy, one of the most important lessons you learn in life is what battles to fight, when to fight a battle and when not to fight a battle. And I think that's what Becky's saying. As long as you're not changing the word, you know, change is not necessarily bad, whether we like it or not. And I think people that are older, that are spiritually mature, those are the ones I expect to be able to accommodate for a different generation more than I do the younger. A lot of times, younger figure it out as they mature.
If they have the guidance, a lot of times they need that guidance. And I think that's where the word long suffering comes in. We need to be long
Oh yeah.
suffering. We need to be compassionate. And boy, if there's an opportunity, the Bible teaches us to seek the old paths. And the
Hmm.
principle also in the book of Deuteronomy and everything about teaching these things to your children. Older people, I'm including myself in that. Even though I like to think I'm still a young man, we need to teach younger people to seek the old paths and why those. I think about Israel, that pile of stones. Why is that pile of stones there? What does that represent? Doesn't mean we what's the word I'm looking for? Dismiss younger generations or what they think, but at the same time, we need to try to understand where they're coming from as well. I hope that
You're
makes
wondering
sense.
what I'm
Right.
doing with my ear thing. I always get on to my wife because she'll be teaching and she's got both ears covered. So she talks louder. I got to thinking they may be hearing me down the hallway. Um, so I'm trying to tone it down just a little bit. But
Right.
Rick Jones pointed out, he says, we need to be more tolerant of young people as long as it doesn't change the word. And they, this is them saying it. We had our time. The point I would add to that is if we really are concerned about whether our children are faithful to God or not, we need to learn to figure out what battles. There are some battles I've had to learn to say, you know what, when it comes down to it, I'm not gonna put myself out over this issue because in the grand scheme of things, as long as he's going to worship and he's serving God and he's making wise decisions, and then I'm going to choose to plant my flag over that. I'm not going to fight over something else. You know, I decided that on haircut. I've always been one to keep it short, combed over to the side. My boys have different type of hair than I have. Um, and sometime back, theirs is really curly, and sometimes it'll get kind of shaggy, and I just told him, I said, as long as I could tell you're a boy, that's all I care about. I want to be able to tell that you're a boy with your hair, because I just decided in the grand scheme of things, out of everything that I want, do I want them to reject what's important because I'm pushing a personal preference that I have? Does that make sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And that's being
Yeah.
that's
So,
being sensitive to the generational gap there, because and that's what it's all about. You need to be sensitive, you need to be long suffering, you need to be compassionate and try to see things from other points of view. That's I think a problem that all of mankind has. We're selfish. We don't like change, and we don't want to accept another person's point of view. We don't want to put ourselves, and what did Jesus say? We need to put ourselves in other people's shoes. That's a big paraphrase right there. But we
and
need
you know
to.
what I found out is when I tend not to push my way, a lot of times they figure out dad's way, whether they know it or not,
How about
actually
that?
works. Because when I give them that freedom, they end up coming around to what I would have told them to do anyway.
Well,
Yeah.
there's a big word right there, the freedom. We need to give freedom sometimes to be able to make those choices.
My wife puts on there the unwillingness of some to change and work and stifle the growth and faith of younger Christians. Young Christians want to work and do. Older Christians are tired. The older Christian needs to let the younger ones do so. And I and really the beauty of the church ought to be this harmony of the body working together, young and old.
Yeah.
And when we've got to embrace it now, sometimes we become territorial, and I can see that. To I know one congregation in particular I'm thinking of, um, that they found themselves that there's this one man and he better always lead the singing, and I mean he was always going to lead the singing. Well, never gave any opportunity, and I'll just tell you, there was a congregation I was attending that I love dearly. They are great, and here I was at smaller congregations that embraced me as a young person. It's like, I mean, I'm talking about every time I turn around, hey, hey, Guyton, you want to lead singing? Because they knew I was in band, I was into music, and they would embrace me. Hey, will you lead a prayer? Will you? I mean, I'm talking about I was always involved. I went to this larger congregation, and next thing you know, I was never able to lead singing, and that was important to me, but I wasn't able to do that. And an elder asked me one day, and this is how awesome it was with their elders, by the way, because an elder noticed I was upset. He came out and saw me. He said, "What's wrong with you?"
Wow.
And I told him, and he actually made a change. He said, "You know what? We're gonna create opportunities for you." Did you say there was a comment, Ray?
Yeah, I did want to say something. I'm hearing a interesting thing between what you're saying and what Troy is saying is that when we get up to a certain age, we get tired, right? And there's the opportunity to you either because you're tired, you stop everything from happening, or because you're tired, you embrace the youth and allow them, bring them into the work, teach them how to do the things so that you don't have to do them anymore and teach that next generation. So you take your tiredness and your age and you use it either in a good way or a bad way, and that's up to us. What are we going to do with the next generation?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Insight from a young man.
I mean, and it's awesome, and to see the zeal and enthusiasm. I talked
Amen.
to a young, I talked to a young person recently, and uh, I don't want to reveal too much, but our eldership agreed to allow one of our young ladies to help start teaching a Bible class so she can start learning. And I saw an excitement in her, and I'm thankful the elders let me mention that to her because I really enjoyed getting to see how she was excited about that.
Yeah, we need to be
You know,
careful. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
no, 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 no. Go ahead, go ahead.
We need to be careful with what when we think about generation gap and stuff like that. Even that can sound scary. Sometimes it's not. It's simple things of what you're talking about. You just get somebody involved. You just invite them. Speaking of that, even the way we speak, the way the words that we use. I learned this. This is outside of the Bible, outside of the church, but in a social organization that I'm involved in, we learned that you don't invite younger generations to be a member of this. What you do is you ask them to participate in a project that you're going to be doing. That that
Oh,
that grabs them more. The idea of inviting them to become a member, that sounds old fashioned. It sounds like they're not interested in joining something. What they're interested in is participating in moving a project forward or something like that. You see, it's semantics sometimes, just because of
yep.
and we know that, young people and even older people have different ways of speaking to each other. They have their own lingos and things like that.
Let me throw one thing in here on the discussion though, because it can be hard. I mean, it really can be because there's certain things you want to be done and done right, and you can't just turn everything over. And that's where guidance, but not being overbearing, and so knowing when to invite them to participate is the key. And so find the right way to embrace them, to find those right projects, you know. And because if we put too much on them and they fail, that's not going to be good anyway. So it may be starting them off leading one song at a time. I re- Troy, did I ever tell you about the time that I led the singing for the first time without my dad?
No.
Because Southern Illinois, I was already baptized, and I was going out there, and we were actually uh, we were talking about the all right, Southern Illinois. We had these Sunday afternoon Bible bowls, and we would go to this Bible bowl area wide, and the preachers would be back there grading the tests that we would take. And meanwhile, everybody would go to the auditorium and lead a song. Well, I'd been leading singing for a while, I thought. And so I got up there to lead a song, and Daddy wasn't out there. And I found out Daddy had been helping me out a lot. And so,
Uh,
you don't go throw them up there and say, "Hey, lead the whole service," but it's a progression, and I love to see that happen in congregations.
let me add something
Um,
to what you were just saying there, if I may. In fact, I would like to encourage anybody who's watching this program, start a leadership development class or study or mentorship or something that you get the older men and the younger men together, and older women and younger women together as well in their own class. But just start a leadership development study or class, and you will see a big difference in the way that your congregation operates.
exactly. First Timothy chapter 3. I want to remind us of this. Those qualifications of an elder, that doesn't happen overnight.
No.
And many young men disqualify themselves before they ever get to the age of being an elder. And so when we need to start training them is while they are young. Um, Troy, you reminded me of a question that we had come in last week, but I want to wait till after the break
It's
because
a
I think
big
it may take
question.
just a little bit. Yeah, I think it'll take a little bit longer to answer than what we have before the break. I appreciate the comments that get brought in here, because Titus 2 is that idea of older and younger. There was an elder I knew in a congregation, and he really taught me a lot about how to deal with my kids. And he would say, and I think it was you, Troy, brought out that I mentioned the word freedom. Is I remember the first time, and this probably scares some people, but um, he told me, he said, "Here, do you care if your boys have a lighter?" I was like, "What?" Why are you giving my kid a lighter? He's gonna burn something down. But he said, look, he said, if you give him a lighter, you're gonna take the curiosity away from it, much like a knife or something like that. He said, let him sit there and flick it and learn how to use it just a little bit. And he said, you don't have to give it to him all the time. And I noticed whenever he would always work with kids, and he was great working with children, he would let them do things. I mean, it would be nothing of him to sit there and take a nail gun in a controlled setting and let a kid just sit there and hit nails into a board that wasn't needed, only for him to have to go back and replace the board later. But what did he let that child do? He helped them develop mentally, emotionally, as well as physically, learning how to do some things.
That's right.
And so if we get that mindset, we can do that in the church. And that's one of the greatest things I keep hearing about. Um, says you have to keep them involved instead of just sitting them on the pew. The more members are involved, the better. And I agree with that.
Amen.
Involvement.